Where growth is expected within a company and the growth rate is expected to be constant, we can still use a perpetuity formula to value the stream of future dividends. The price of a share, where the company is expected to grow at a constant or sustainable growth rate, is equal to the dividend per share divided by the expected rate of return less the growth rate. This is also known as the Gordon growth model. Later, when we value the company test cow using a free cash flow model, we will use the simple growth perpetuity formula to calculate the continuing value of test cow. Notice that we can rearrange this equation and make R, the expected rate of return, or G, the sustainable or constant growth rate, the subject of the equation. This can provide us with interesting insights on these parameters. If we rearrange this equation and make R, the expected rate of return, the subject of the equation, we can see that the expected rate of return equals the dividend per share divided by the initial price of the share plus the growth rate. Or in other words, the expected rate of return equals the dividend yield plus the growth rate. We could use this equation to estimate the expected return for a stock. If we rearrange the Gordon growth model and make G, the growth rate, the subject of the equation, we can see that the growth rate equals the return on equity multiplied by the plowback ratio. Later, when we build our valuation model, you may hear the statement, the model is driven by revenue. In actual fact, the model is driven by the expected growth rate that we assume, which we can see from the equation above is determined by both return on equity and the plowback ratio. Let's quickly run over some terminology. The directors of a company can decide to do one of two things with the company's earnings. They can return all or a portion of the earnings to the company's shareholders by declaring and paying a dividend. Or they can retain all or a portion of the earnings within the company as a cheap source of internal finance. The payout ratio describes the portion of the company's earnings that are returned to shareholders in the form of dividends. The plowback ratio describes the remaining portion of earnings that is retained within the firm as a cheap source of finance. The sustainable or constant growth rate describes the growth rate when the company has reached a mature or steady state. This is characterized by a constant plowback ratio, a constant return on equity, and a constant debt ratio.